So welcome to this critical conversation. I'm Bob Bird from the NDSU Extension Innovation Team, and I'm joined by my fellow Innovation Team member, Carrie Johnson. Hey, Carrie.
Hello, everybody.
This idea for this conversation, I think this is an issue about social media and evaluation that we've been dealing with, since we started using social media, because we like to measure things in extension and in academia, and when we're doing stuff, we feel like we should be measuring it. So it's been an issue for a while. Recently, I got an email from Andrew Thostenson. I don't know if Andrew's on here right now, but Andrew's been using Twitter, and he really is seeing the benefit in terms of people engaging with him on Twitter. But he wrote me an email saying that he was struggling about, like, how do I report this in QPR? He used some calculations in order to report that activity. And then he also asked, he says, I'll quote Andrew from the email here, as a specialist, the question is, what is the educational value of this? From a tangible perspective, there's no question I'm better informed both at the state and especially the national level. I never knew, I even have a fairly good idea of the pesticide situations in Australia and Canada. I never knew any of this before. But he kind of goes on to say, like, how do I realistically measure this? So I think that's, for me, that's sort of the core of how this conversation got started and sort of where we'd like to go with it. If you have thoughts about where you'd like it to go, please share those in the chat. I'm gonna give you another link where you can share in the document that we're co-creating, and maybe while I'll do that, I'll let Carrie jump in here and share her thoughts a little bit about this conversation.
So I really, again, as a specialist even, how do you measure that impact on our participants? So if somebody just sees a post or reads some education piece, how do we then measure that impact? So that's kind of where I've always been with the social media is, yes, it's great to put this out there, but how do I then report that impact? So other people's ideas and what your thoughts are on the subject too, I think will help all of us get through this and try and decide how we do this together as a system as well.
Thanks, Carrie, and you can see, I hope you can see that I posted that link to the document on OneDrive. I've just got a kind of a rough outline out there. Please go ahead and once you click that link, I think, and actually to edit, you'll have to click the Edit in Browser button. It'd probably be the easiest way to do it, and then we can jump in there and edit together. So edit document, edit in browser. And I should be in there now, and we'll see if looks like there's 4 other people in there and some guest contributors. So yeah, let's go ahead and add our thoughts there, and we'll have a record of sort of our conversation today. So the other thing I'm going to share with you, now that we've shared one link, I'll share another link with you, is a poll that we put together. I just need to get the link here going. I'm going to share that link with you, and then I'll share my screen with the poll too, so you can kind of see what's going on as you participate. So Carrie and I put together, actually Carrie put together, and I created the poll, a series of questions to kind of get our conversation started, just to get an idea of where everybody is at. And let me get that link here for you. There we go. So here's the link to the poll. Feel free to jump in there and answer the question. So the first question is, do you use social media for your work? And hopefully you're seeing that, if you're following that link, you're seeing that question now. Somebody is, because I see there's a response.
I was quick, sorry.
That's okay. Carrie was ready.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd be interested, once you get to that poll in the link in the chat, how many people use social media in their work. There we go. We've got a no, so at least I know there's more than one person responding in there. And can you guys see the responses can you see the responses after you've responded or not?
No, I just see my response. So if you want to share your screen,
I'll share my screen. And you can kind of see where that's going if you want to jump over to there. Connecting. There we go. Should be seeing the responses.
There we go.
Awesome. Is everybody? Yeah. So if you're just joining, I see some people are popping on. We're starting off with a little poll. You can find it in the chat there. Let me repost it again in case if you just joined, you might not be seeing it. Oops, I'm hitting too many buttons here. I was on the wrong thing. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get my back button here. Close that. Never put the tech guy in charge of the tech. This is rule number 1. All right, there we go. So those responses are on there. Now let me see if I can get you the link again. So if you haven't had a chance to respond to the first poll question there, I just posted the link in the chat again. I'll give it just a couple more, 30 seconds or so for other people who just joined to respond if you haven't already. It looks like about 95%. Craig, you're saying you only see your response probably when you're responding to the poll. So I'm sharing my screen too, so you can see that. So it looks like 94% yes, 6% no. So it looks like most of us are using. Oh, sorry, Nicole, that you're having network issues. Looks like most of us are using social media for work. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question. If you still have that window open, you should see the next question here shortly. So the next question is which platforms do you use? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. If you use an other one, if you want to throw that into the chat or into the document that we shared, that would be interesting to see.
Just as an FYI, you can only choose one. Sorry
oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. Sorry about that. Let's skip that question then. I'll go to the next one. Okay, hopefully this one works. So the next question is rank your social media objectives. And I will try and go back and see if I can fix this other issue. So oh, here we go. Awesome, that's working for people. So far I've done what? 2 things right? We were able to get on the call. And this question works.
I was just thinking if it was me, how many mistakes I would have had. So you're doing
great. You're very kind, Carrie. If you have other objectives, these are sort of the top of my head, and I shared them with Carrie, and we thought these were sort of the main objectives. If you think there's other objectives that you're trying to achieve with social media, again, if you want to share those in the chat or in the document that we're co-creating, and I'll share that link to that document for new people too here shortly. But yeah, it looks like right now promote events and other opportunities is the first objective, and share educational content is the second most popular one. Building relationships with the public is third, and communicate NDSU Extension's impact is the fourth. That's kind of interesting, sort of given what we're hearing out of the SBARE recommendations and some of the stuff that administration is looking at. So hopefully everybody got a chance to answer that question.
And I just mentioned, so in one of our programs, we have used social media to evaluate our program. So asking participants to actually take pictures of themselves doing the activity we've taught them, or asking for feedback from a program that we've done in person. So trying to use it in a little bit different way.
Thanks, Carrie. And Penny's saying, sometimes she discovers community or agricultural issues that I can educate about. So that might be another sort of one of those potential objectives is informal needs assessment, maybe, or something like that. Get an idea of what people are talking about and what they care about. Andrew sort of mentioned that as well regarding issues in pesticides kind of across the country, and across the world, around the world, I should say. Following other researchers, Miranda says, so really from improving your own knowledge, kind of professional development standpoint. Great. So we've got one more here, if it works. So I'm going to go to the next question in the poll. And that is, do you evaluate your social media, yes or no? So we have lots of objectives that people shared and ranked, but are we evaluating any of it? So it looks like most of us are not. That's not surprising that we're not, but right now it's 11% say that they are evaluating it. So that sort of rolls into our first kind of question for conversation, and that is, how do we go about doing that? How do we evaluate social media? So I'm going to go ahead and stop presenting now. And we'll just start with that first question. Again, if you just joined, we do have a document that we're co-creating, collaborating on, where we can share our thoughts. If you want to just stay in the chat, that's absolutely fine as well. But this is an opportunity for you to kind of put something together with your colleagues that potentially we could all use sometime. So I'll share the link to that again. That's out in OneDrive if you want to add some thoughts there. Otherwise, please go ahead and share your thoughts in the chat. How can we or turn on your microphone? I shouldn't forget about that. This is supposed to be a conversation, so please feel free to do that. So I'll just throw that first question out there. How can we evaluate our social media efforts?
So at minimum, the only thing I've been tracking, which I know it's not enough, is just like number of contacts and number of shares, likes, those type of things, or retweets and likes. But it's not capturing things adequately, I don't feel like.
So Miranda, when you're using that for evaluation, like how are you using it? Does it inform?
Well, and I'm not using it for evaluation. Really, the only thing I'm doing is reporting for like PT&E and things like that. So it's just contacts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Miranda. Anyone else who there was a small percentage who said that they're evaluating, or if you're not evaluating or measuring, like what are your ideas for doing that?
I do look at my just kind of the basic analytics of impressions and engagement. So it's a little bit of what I've looked at it. I don't really report it anywhere, but just to kind of get an idea of, are people seeing it, and if they are they engaging with it, and then what types of posts are they actually engaging with, and trying to then kind of change how I'm posting things to mimic those that are getting more engagement than others.
Right. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah. So informing, program improvement, right? If you think of social media as programming. Carmen says insights on the page. So Carmen, you're talking about your Facebook page there and Facebook Insights. Is everybody pretty familiar with Facebook Insights? Is anybody not familiar with them? Yeah, so thanks, Dean. Yeah, so it's sort of a little bit what Carrie's talking about in terms of being able to look at those metrics on Facebook specifically. Facebook has insights, so if you have a Facebook page, right, and so typically we'd have that for an organization, your accounting office, a program sometimes, a department. Then you can access, if you're an admin, you can access those Facebook insights, and you can see things like how many people saw this post, how many people liked this post or commented on this post, as a measure of what Facebook calls, and I'm using air quotes here, I don't have my video on, but calls engagement. And so that's one way to at least know, is this worth it? When we talk about Facebook specifically, there's a recent algorithm change in terms of the news feed, and there's some question about how many people actually are going to see each post, even if they have liked or followed your page. So at least that's one way to check and see, are people even seeing it, right? If I have 500 followers, but each post is only getting seen by 10 people or 20 people, then you can kind of make some judgments about time and effort probably too. Anyone want to jump in on Facebook Insights? Anybody use it sort of regularly and want to share more about how it might be useful for you? So Carmen's saying if you look deeper into the numbers, you learn when you get the most engagement as far as time. That's, time of day, and what kind of posts get the best reaction, right? And so when we're talking about types of posts, usually like text with link, images, videos, that kind of thing. Thanks, Carmen. What other thoughts do you have on this question? How can we evaluate our social media efforts?
I've never done it, but I know Abby does the mapping of her network, and I'm not sure how you do that, but that's one way to show it on Twitter.
So I'm sort of guessing at what that might be, Miranda. So you've seen it before. Can you describe it a little bit? Is it how?
Yep. Sonia just did the tweet maps.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, there seems like those third-party Twitter tools kind of come and go a little bit, and a lot of people are using TweetReach and some of the other tools early on, and then Twitter sometimes changes the access that those third-party tools have to the database, and but that's an interesting one. I haven't heard of that one before. Thanks for everybody who's in the document adding this stuff, so that Carrie or I don't have to be taking notes.
I'm actually taking notes.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Carrie. I hope everybody join in, help Carrie out.
In the chat and what people are saying, so that way we've got something to go back to and look at too. So.
Thanks, Becky, for taking notes as well. So, so do we want to move on to the next question? Do you guys have more to share about how we evaluate our social media efforts? The one thing I'll throw in there is that I do some of my work is with the Military Families Learning Network, and the network really recently changed how they looked at social media, and it's actually continuing to evolve. They used to have network members report the kind of stuff that you find in metrics, right? How many shares, how many likes, how many retweets, how many engagements in Facebook, that kind of thing. And they really, they didn't find that was useful. Now they're not having to do some of the reporting of direct and indirect contacts the way that we do, so it's a little bit different. So I'll throw that caveat in there. But how they changed it was, instead of asking each concentration area, is what we call each kind of sub-department in the network, instead of asking each concentration area to share those metrics or to measure that stuff, they started asking people to report their social media stories. So each month they would get into Basecamp, a project management tool, and share what they considered the story of their social media interaction. So that's a much more qualitative approach. I don't know if it belongs in this discussion, but I thought I'd throw it out there. Okay. So the other question that, and again, this is supposed to be a conversation. I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm trying to practice my silence. I don't always do a good job of that, but so please jump in if you have other questions, if you think that there are particular issues that we need to talk about. The next question that Carrie and I kind of talked about is, how do we report the what we learn, right? If we're going to evaluate social media, and let's say we rely on metrics, then how do we report them? So sorry to pick on you, Miranda, but you opened up the door by talking. You said that you report your social media in direct contacts in your annual report?
Yep. So I put like just basic, like the number of followers I have and like how that changes from year to year for my PT&E, and then the engagements for each too. But it's just it's once a year broad number, so it's not in depth. What I'd like to do is I don't have the time to go through it, but is if we could break it down by topic and so you could use it for your impact reports somehow, or impact statements. But that seems like a lot of work that I don't have time to do.
Thanks, Miranda.
So this is Becky. Are you all reporting this in what used to be QPRs, now will be pairs? And if so, are we doing it consistently? I guess that's kind of my question. What are you doing, and should we even worry about it being consistent across the organization?
Well, it would be nice to have some guidelines.
And I agree. This is Carrie. I actually don't even really report my social media numbers anywhere. Unless, like a Facebook Live, I do those with like views, but otherwise just my posts, I don't report those anywhere. What do others do?
And I don't report mine in any extension document or things, but I was encouraged by Greg to put them in my PT&E.
And I haven't had that conversation with my department head, so.
So my loaded question is, if this is being encouraged, should it be reported somehow?
I would say yes, especially if it's something that SBEAR and other folks are wanting to see, so we can show that we're making that effort and trying to engage people using technology.
This is Nicole. I've got a question. Because I've got a social media post on Facebook that has well over 1.4 million views and things like that. It's continually going and still being looked at across social media all over the world. So how do we capture, just writing down what the last number was last time and how many more were taken over the top of that for the next time that we report on a QPR or in pairs for activity reporting? You know what I mean? I'm just trying to figure out how we would capture that.
When I do it, I put the dates that I'm documenting from. I don't know if that helps, but at least it gives a time frame.
Yeah, I do the same thing. As of this date, this was the number of views. And then on bigger ones like that, again, this is for PT and E, I update those numbers. I'll go back and look at those. But I don't report on everything, so.
I like the idea of capturing the impact and the range that we're reaching, but I just don't know how well the tools in social media will allow us to capture the information that we're wanting.
What do you think the information that we want is, Nicole?
Well, Bob, you and I have had this discussion before too. You know, when you're looking at ticks on Facebook, it counts every time someone scrolls past it. So you don't know if someone actually stopped and read something. It's just saying that it's been viewed this many times. Well, how long was that view? Was it 1 second, or did you get 10 minutes out of them? Did they actually click on the link that you put on that post? Are they watching the video all 5 minutes of it, or do they only watch the first minute and then opt out? You're not knowing how much information is actually being transferred to the person when you're on social media.
Thanks, Nicole. That's a good point. Yeah. Carrie, I think were you gonna jump in there?
No.
Oh, okay. I guess I was hoping.
Well, I mean, I look at it too. So yes, these are indirect numbers, and that's also, and SBIR wants us to do more technology. However, like these indirect numbers, they're no longer, I mean, that's not reported at the federal level anymore. I think probably because a lot of these reasons there's no hard and fast rules for everybody, so it's a little more difficult to actually measure.
I want to catch up a little bit in the chat. So Carmen mentioned HootSuite as a platform for managing your social media. So you can have posts show up in multiple channels, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Let's see, and Carmen also says, I know this is specifically social media, but yesterday Becky and Julie Garden Robinson, they talked about broad print media coverage, specifically when news column is picked up and published in a newspaper. So are you asking what do we do about that, Carmen, in terms of reporting or measuring? We can follow up on that. And yeah, by the way, if you want to open your microphone, anyone, please go ahead and do that. I know we've got quite a few, 27 in here now, but hopefully we don't get too much feedback or echo, but feel free to jump in and interrupt me anytime. Kim saying, I see the value in reporting social media since those numbers might replace the printed pieces, newsletters, publications we can no longer afford to print. And Don is saying, so on a report, is the impact emphasis the impact of social media or the topic that is covered? If you understand what I'm getting at, because it's really hard to evaluate the impact when you may not have direct feedback. That's a good point, Don. And I think maybe that was a little bit what Nicole's getting at too. But that said, we do the same thing with face-to-face stuff all the time, right? We report numbers and things like that, but not always feedback, although that's supposed to be in an impact report. And then Deb is saying, this is an important conversation. In a year, we have to show SBIR we have a system and are on the way to making progress. We know you are all doing some great things, but we'll need to figure out how to track our social media efforts. We can look to what others are doing too, but everyone is trying to figure this out. And I really thank you all for the input today. Keep on thinking. Yeah, and Don made a good point. Yeah, and Carmen is following up on the newspaper column. It's hard to know when a column is picked up, definitely. Sometimes we learn about that stuff through the web somewhere, where somebody shares it on a newspaper website or something, and all of a sudden it appears in social media. So sorry to have run through those chat comments really quick, but I did want to do that, especially if we have anybody who's not monitoring that chat. So all of that said, anybody want to jump in on any of those things that were shared in the chat, or did that spark any other thoughts from anybody?
I was going to say this might not even be related, but I wonder, is there a place where we know all of there isn't, I know. Like who actually has what within the system? I mean, does everybody know that there is a topic page in Facebook for a certain, I'll just use personal and family finance, or, you know, the program specific pages? I mean, is there a way for us to actually know what our colleagues are doing and how they're using it and actually look at it, besides just trying to do a search? Okay, Sonia, thank you for answering. She's trying to put together a spreadsheet for that, so answers that question.
This is Becky, and what I think I would like to see is consistency. Maybe we need the innovation team or another group to work on some ideas, so either everybody reports or nobody reports, and what they report and where they go to look to find it. But I guess it seems like we need to work together and figure out how to do this consistently, so it means something for the organization. And obviously I would lean towards gathering the data. I don't know if there's a place for it in pairs. Is there? Nobody knows.
So in the chat, Carrie's saying start simple. Does every county office from the county view have a Facebook page that they actually use? So maybe that is something to follow up on Sonia's inventory. Are they out there and are they being used?
Hey, Bob. I might have missed this, but do we know how other extension programs track their stuff? Or
well, I don't. Deb mentioned that a little bit in the chat. I don't know, Deb, what you know, or if you have access to a microphone, or if you want to just share in the chat.
Can you hear me, Bob?
Yep.
Okay, so what I know is pretty basic right now. There's a North Central team of people who work typically with evaluation, and that particular team has had some discussions. I mean, everybody's trying to figure this out, like I said. So they've had some discussions. They're about to put kind of a little summary of things related to evaluation together. And within that, there's some discussion about how do we evaluate our social media. But there is no, I mean, Bob, you said too, you know, the crew that you work with and you are around, I would especially think maybe some of the e-extension people, et cetera. I think a lot of people are talking and there are a lot of ideas. It's just not come together yet. So as in the next year, it's going to come together. It's going to happen. And so we just need to be on top of this and get your ideas, because my thinking is always that, you know, we got to try and keep it simple. We spend so much time with all of our recording and reporting, and it's unfortunately a necessity in this day and age, but it's also not easy to find the time to do all that. So we're trying to figure out ways to keep it simple. So I don't know, maybe kind of a long answer, but regardless of what other people do, we have to figure something out. So if we just continue to have our discussions of what we think might work for us, we can always integrate that with other bright ideas that come from other states.
Thanks, Deb. So a couple things just to catch up on in the chat. As Deb mentioned, not exactly a place in pairs, but maybe there could be. Dean's saying there should probably be another category now called direct contacts that specifically allows for social media stats. So that's one. There's one of the ideas, and Carmen saying in the old QPRs we reported the circulation of the publications we knew about just because everyone had the newspaper, it also did not tell the story of full engagement. Did they read it? Did it make an impact? So that kind of leads into the next question. I don't know if, based on the responses to some of the social media objectives that we ranked, and I think the top one, if I remember right, was marketing and branding, or marketing and promoting events. But the next question we had was how do we measure the educational value of what we do in social media? So if we do have the objective of being educational, of sharing educational materials or educating people, how can we measure that? Because I think we've been over the ground that likes and shares anyway, and retweets don't necessarily probably aren't great evidence of that.
Bob, can I just make a comment?
Sure, go ahead, Don.
On what I feel the Facebook pages out there for our county, yes, all you see are maybe the reaches or the likes and that type of thing, but I think it has really raised an awareness, and it's really hard to judge the impact of that, but we hear it on the street when we're out talking to people and at different functions and stuff, and so I think your social media is really a good tool to have, even if we got to figure out some way to measure it though, and I don't know how you go about doing it, but I think it is a very positive tool to be using.
You make a really good point. I want to piggyback on here for 1 second. We are so ingrained in having to have impacts, level 2, 3, etc. What difference are we making? Which is important. I mean, that is the bottom line of what we have been asked to do. So sometimes I'm just wondering, are we so ingrained in that thinking that we forget when Dawn says it's made a big difference in awareness? Our big pet peeve is always that nobody knows who we are. That's awareness. So maybe when we are trying to figure out how to measure our social media impacts, we shouldn't begin by saying, what difference are they making? Let's begin by saying, all right, if the big purpose of one of our big goals is creating bigger awareness, and that also is in our SBAR review, we have to do a better job making people aware of who Extension is. Maybe we don't have to worry about the level 2, 3, 4. Maybe we can just begin by looking at social media from the awareness point of view, and then eventually work into some other things. So, we're all trying to figure out how do we do this deeper than just numbers and so forth. Well, maybe in this case we should start here. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to a lot of what other things we're told, but it just kind of hit me that I'm not so sure that we have to dig so much deeper. I think maybe we start there. I don't know. That might be a harebrained thought, but it came to me.
Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Dawn. I think it's a good thought. I mean, I think it occurs to me that maybe that starts to get us into a place where we might need to categorize some of these things or think about them as segments. And I think Miranda alluded to that earlier about just sort of different programs, because we might have some stuff that is the awareness stuff, and maybe all of it contributes to awareness no matter what we're sharing on social media, but then we might choose to dig into particular programs. So, working with the Family Table Project, probably specifically, we do some reporting on social media as part of that project, and social media is just part of the picture, right? Because it's a program. There's a lot of other stuff going on that's not social media, and so it becomes part of the picture, and we might want to use some of those first level numbers, the likes and the shares and comments and stuff, as just part of the overall evaluation picture. But because we're trying to do something educational, maybe we want to dig deeper on that particular project as opposed to just looking at the overall numbers of our Facebook page. So I'm practicing my silence. I'm not sure what's going on. There's maybe a lot of thinking going on, I hope. Any other contributions in that question is how do we measure the educational value, or do we want to scrap that question altogether and kind of maybe start smaller as Deb suggested?
I mean, starting smaller and being able to get the system to report as a whole and start there might actually be better. Just find a place to start and then look at those objectives down the road of how do we then determine the educational value of that, but being able to report at least as a system.
Okay. Well, it's getting pretty quiet.
Has anybody used the new polling features in social media? We've tried that a little bit to get a little feedback from participants. I don't know if that's one way to look at evaluating our social media.
I haven't tried it, but I find it really interesting, and I would like to start utilizing it because I think that's a way we can get some interaction.
Andy Robinson is planning on using some Twitter polls and potentially Facebook polls to get some evaluation data back. He's kind of been challenged by his department to measure his social media use, and so we met and talked a little bit about that. So that might be awesome to kind of, if there's some people who want to experiment with it, and maybe we could share some ideas about the kinds of questions that might work in that format, where we felt like we're getting useful data back, but it's still easy for people to answer and that kind of thing.
We had a program coming up and we asked what kind of snacks they wanted. So that's the only time we've used it. So it wasn't really an evaluation, but it was more of a needs assessment.
Yeah, needs assessment. Really, that was a huge program improvement step, I think, Carrie.
Popcorn or cookies? We ended up with both.
Yeah, Dana, it definitely gets people to interact. So if you guys aren't watching the chat, there's a number of things in there. Sonia mentions it's a struggle to measure for us because of the lack of a sort of tangible sales conversion, a point where we can say, yep, that person is a convert. So what led up to that? And then Carmen's saying younger people in her county are using texting more than social media. That's a challenge for us, definitely. Becky mentioned the Copernicus report. Do you remember how many years ago that is, Becky? That was like when I first started, I think, or even before that.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been several years, but still, that's the only thing we have that has evaluated objectively awareness.
Right.
But it's years old.
Yeah. So.
And maybe that was before social media.
Well, it's definitely before mainstreaming of social media, yeah.
But it was so high then that other states couldn't hardly believe it, but yet we all know we're frustrated with the lack of awareness. So,
well, definitely our population has definitely changed in the last decade, so maybe that number has changed too. Kim is saying, personally on Facebook, she often shares things that she already agrees with and want other people to believe as she does. Don't necessarily share because I have learned something new. So that might be Kim, you might be saying, are you saying that's a challenge for us then to use social media as an educational tool.
No, not as an educational tool. I think it has great benefits that way. I just think in measuring shares, we're not necessarily measuring self-improvement, we're measuring other improvement. Like, I want other people to think like I do. And I was being a little facetious there, but I think that's the kind of things that I typically share, things that I want other people to know how I view it, so I don't share because, oh, here's something new I've learned. So I'm not saying social media doesn't have its place in education. I certainly think it does, but I'm not sure. It just adds to what we're saying about the challenge of counting those things as anything more than, brief interaction.
Right. Thanks, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts about measuring educational value? So I think how we'd like to wrap up in the conversation is to talk a little bit about where do we go from here. At the bottom of the co-created document, I'm going to share that link one more time in case you missed it. There are some questions for going forward. There's also a tools and a tips area if you have things to share there. Those are on page 2 now after some notes have been taken. So you'll need to scroll down and to get those. If you haven't accessed a shared document like this before, once you click on it, if you want to add to it, click the edit document and then edit in browser, and you'll be able to contribute to it. That questions area, I think, is maybe a place where we could get some direction in terms of where do you want to go from here. What questions do you want answered? I know we've had some recommendations that have come up earlier about having some guidelines for reporting social media, all those kinds of things. But I'd encourage you to share either now with your microphone or in the chat, or if you want to go to the document, where do you want to go from here, moving this conversation forward and improving at least what we're doing now with social media evaluation and reporting?
Deb, rather than reinventing the wheel, do you expect this North Central group to have some recommendations here pretty soon?
They've really focused more on traditional evaluation of programs, and this has come up in conversation. So I don't think there'll be anything major real soon. I think they're finishing this up, and then hopefully that's where they'll go next. But I don't think it'll come within the next couple months. I think it'll be farther out. I can put a question out to them and ask.
Okay. Well, you can always continue to contribute to this conversation in the document, or by emailing me, emailing Carrie. We can add stuff to the document for you. And I think I can say, I don't want to speak for the whole innovation team, but we can definitely keep this on our agenda to continue to talk about. I think Ryan's on. Ryan? Caitlin, do I have your assent in that? Okay, awesome. We'll keep this on our agenda. We'll talk about this at our next meeting and kind of continue to see how we can move this conversation forward. Any last contributions, words of wisdom to share, questions that you guys might have that you want addressed? So Miranda's saying, could we consult an evaluation specialist on this topic? That might be a darn good idea. So let's add that to the, thank you, whoever's adding that to the document.
And Bob, just curious, has this come up in any of your e-extension group discussions?
It has come up. There's been some EdTech Learning Network tweet chats about it. I'd have to go back and look at those, at the summation of those to see, to remember what exactly was said. I think it's been pretty consistent. Everybody's struggling with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's sort of where everyone's at, is trying to figure it out. And so usually it's really very case by case. So some people have some of the innovators in other states have just said, oh, this is nothing special to report, specific to report. This is part of my programming. So if they report, I did a tweet chat, they would report it in the same way as I did a face-to-face event, and kind of not worry about it, about the about translating it in some way. But there's definitely lots of people who are active in this environment. So yeah, we can always reach out to those people through EdTech LN. Probably would be the easiest way.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else that you want to talk about in this synchronous meeting, please continue to contribute to the document. I'm gonna send out an email kind of follow up to this with the recording and the link to the document, so other people can jump in and get involved as well. So look for that if you still have things you want to add to the document, but you don't have the link anymore. I'll share that out later today. All right, thanks everybody. Thanks for the great conversation. Have a great day.